Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we have a look at the 1987 film Near Dark. This is episode 398. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So, warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castlebridge Media, home of the Castle of Horror anthology. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, which you can find at Global Comics. He is a Best Writer Ringo nominee, Austin Chronicle Best of Austin Award winner, and a member of the PEN America Fellowship. Say hello, Drew.
Finger licking fucking good.
Yes, indeed. And finally, that's Arizona, man. Arizona and Oklahoma, violence all through. And finally, also in Denver, color commentary from the one and only Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
We keep odd hours.
I like that. That's a good line, and it's such a tossed off line that it's like it almost gets by you with just how wry that is. All right, Near Dark. It's sort of remarkable that in all these years we have never talked about Near Dark. Near Dark is a 1987 American neo-Western horror film co-written and directed by Kathryn Bigelow in her solo directorial debut, and it stars Adrian Pasdar, Jenny Wright, Bill Paxton, Lance Henriksen, and Jeanette Goldstein. The plot follows a young man in a small Oklahoma town who becomes involved with a family of nomadic American vampires. So that's Near Dark. I can't wait to discuss this one because I know it's one that it's shocking, like I say, that we haven't gotten to. We're going to do it this way. Let's get our opening thoughts. We'll go Tony, Julia, Drew, and then I'll get us started. Tony, opening thoughts, 1987, Kathryn Bigelow's Near Dark.
I like this movie a lot. I was lucky enough to see it, I think, pre-pandemic or maybe when theaters opened back up. I can't even remember. I saw it in the theater in the relatively recent theatrical past. By the way, speaking of that line, I actually had a lyric. I haven't put it to anything, but I had a song called "I Keep" or "We Keep Strange Hours." So it's
Nice.
that's also. I was like, oh yeah, hey, that's in this movie too. But yeah, I really like the movie. 87. Wow. I mean, it still feels like it has a lot of contemporary stuff. It's, I don't know if it's the perfect movie, but man, does it. Every time I see it, I see something new. I catch a nuance in it, and I think it influenced a lot of movies afterwards. It brings up a lot of interesting bits about vampires, and their lore is fascinating. I think it definitely informs Buffy on several parts. If anybody said, "Nah, we've never seen Near Dark before we made the show," I would say they are liars. It could happen, but it would be I don't know. I don't know if I would believe it. But yeah, I really dig the movie. I'm happy we're discussing it. I picked out a few more things this time that I didn't notice last time. But yeah, I'm stoked that we're covering it because I think it holds up really well. It's got a lot. It could be longer. It could also be a series or a mini series as well.
Yeah.
Easy to string this out into more.
Excellent point. All right, Julia, I'm pretty sure that you hadn't seen Near Dark before, right? So Caleb and May and their southwestern adventure. What did you think?
I mean, I thought I had seen it, but then when I was watching it, I was like, no, I don't think I've seen this. I like the characters a lot. I've been reading about how it's supposed to be like basically a horror western.
Right.
So like the idea that the whole thing is a western but with horror theme. I really like I love that Lance Henriksen got so into it that he was like driving around in full costume picking up hitchhikers to freak them out and see how that would go, which I think is hilarious. And Bill Paxton was also like running around in costume. They both of them were just freaking everybody out in the country. I love that. I love the character of May. She's really weird. I love the character of the kid vampire Homer. I like the little sister. I just think there's actually my least the least interesting character is the main character, really,
Mhm.
because I just feel like he was just kind of. And what's funny is I saw that Johnny Depp had auditioned for that part, and I'm like, that would have
Mm,
been so much more interesting if Johnny Depp had done. But whatever. But I just like how everybody's so different from each other and from this from the similar characters in other movies. There's definitely some stuff that I was just like didn't love, but I thought it was really interesting and
Mhm.
pretty scary at points, especially when Homer is gonna take the little girl and like make her his or whatever. I was really thinking that was going to be like a Kirsten Dunst thing. It's
mm.
like no, but we didn't end up with that. But no, I think it's got some very cool bits.
Fantastic. Thank you. Drew, what about you?
I'm a big fan of this movie. I know it gets compared to Lost Boys a lot, which is another movie
Mm,
that I like quite a bit. I think this movie is a bit better than Lost Boys. I know that's like a controversial thing to say, but I feel like the vampire characters, while there is like a shared sort of punk rock aesthetic, I guess, between the two vampire tribes in both of those movies. I feel like the vampires in this have a more kind of authentic, lived-in kind of vibe. Like
Mhm.
their characters feel like they have a lot more
mm,
depth. I also think like it's less like that sort of like MTV rock and roll vibe and more like sort of cowpunk or psychobilly kind of, because the whole thing has that Western vibe, which, by
There's
the way, this is, not the only vampire Western, but I think it's probably the one to mix those two genres the best. And the way this movie uses rural America, like there's a
yeah.
lot of shots in this movie that could just be paintings. Like they're so freaking beautiful.
It's funny that you
Sorry,
say
Bill
that because I was
Paxton.
literally just reading a comment that's where Catherine Bigelow said she loved Adam Greenberg's cinematography, and she said the railroad track scene. She says, obviously, it's my opinion, but it looks like a painting, like a beautiful muted Cezanne. I just read that,
Yeah,
and you said that, so I'm like, well, I guess
absolutely.
they pulled it off.
Mm,
yeah.
Absolutely. And Bill Paxton is just a treasure in everything, and he's somebody that I felt like we lost way too early, but one of the best movie vampires ever is Severin, and I think the whole bar scene with him is just a gift to horror fans because he is so funny but also so kind of terrifying and violent in that scene. It's terrific, plus set to the Cramps, so awesome.
yeah.
The soundtrack
Yeah,
by
the
Tangerine
soundtrack is
Dream is
awesome.
also really cool. Yeah, like there's just so much to like about this movie. There is, watching it this time, there is like I have one complaint about this movie, and I will get into it when we're talking more about it, but I literally only have one complaint about this movie because I just think it is a wonderful piece of horror cinema.
That's really wonderful. It's so funny how I find it difficult to talk about this movie separated out from like I could from its time from the 80s and in conversation with the Lost Boys, because you could talk about it in conversation with, for instance, other Catherine Bigelow movies, right? Like how does this talk to Point Break or whatever. But I for me, and I think this would make actually a good opening. Instead of me doing an opening thoughts, I'll just go straight into this as a topic. I think we should talk about how this fits into the pop culture, especially regarding how we're presenting vampires in the late '80s and compared to the Lost Boys, which had come out very recently. And the reason I say that is Joel Schumacher's Lost Boys is, I believe, I don't know if this movie is more effective. I don't know if it's better. I do know that it's very different. Like it's trying to do different stuff, way different stuff. They are both extremely stylish. Like Catherine Bigelow's Near Dark and Schumacher's Lost Boys are very stylish, but Schumacher's Lost Boys is a day glow kind of super gay new wave West Coast carnival thing, and which it does. You're exactly right. Feel very MTV. There's slow motion aspects. There's all kinds of there's choral music going on, and it's got a lot more comedy. I mean, it's basically much more of a strange confection. And this is much more of an American. It's an American crime story more than
Well,
anything else. Go
I
ahead.
think you hit on it. The Lost Boys is a tale of the West Coast,
Yeah.
and this is a tale of Western Americana,
Yeah.
or Southwestern Americana, and they both are interesting in their own ways. And I think it is the kind of punk stylings that kind of get them lumped together. Drew, I think you hit on it, but
Mm.
they are way different movies, and they're trying to tell a lot different stories. The Americana aspect of this and the small town aspect of it is different. And one thing I noticed this time, as I'm talking about that,
hmm
what I found fascinating, and I picked up on this time, and I think I picked up on a little bit, but this time it really hit home. Part of how they get away with things and part of their MO is really fascinating because of the place where it takes place.
Mm.
These vampires are able to actually, they aren't always hypnotizing people. They're counting on small town hospitality
Yeah.
to get them their meals. When you see when you see Severin get dressed up in his, two-stepping clothes and
Yeah.
pick up women, it's this idea like, oh, we're all in this small town. You got to be all the good cowboy guys. Even though, we know human nature is human nature, and there's, bad dudes and bad people out there, but the ideal of not to say that people are naive, but there's a certain difference in the way. I mean, you see
There's
them,
there's a
people call
risk.
them pop culture. There's
It's a
like a
different risk
small
assessment.
town kind of, hey, you're from the small town, you must be all right if you kind of fit in.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't fit into the small town I was in, but Severin in his bolo tie and boots and shirt looks like he's ready to go where they're gonna go. Hey, then why don't we pick up the hot guy? And but that charm and the way they're able to spin this, when Macy's Caleb and his friends, it's in this way of like, hey, well, maybe you're an outsider, but if you dress just the right way and affect just the right nuance, you can fit in these small towns and take advantage of that. And I found that fascinating in this watch. That's really how they're able to kind of maneuver.
Well, can I point out something
It's
else
great.
that fits in there? So I agree to some extent. There's a punk styling thing in as much as both sets of vampires are kind of outside of regular middle class existence that we expect most of the audience to be in, right?
Right.
But one thing that I think plays up a lot is young sexiness, is young sexuality.
Sure.
How May's number one skill in catching people is that she's a very sexy human, and she's an even sexier vampire. So she's like a honey pit. She's a fly trap for Adrian Pasdar. By the way, this is Jenny Wright, who is also in Joel Schumacher's what's it called, the one, not About Last Night, but St. Elmo's Fire. Totally different character she plays in St. Elmo's Fire. I mean, this is a very, very transformative actor. But here, she plays this weirdly languid, sexy vampire who Adrian Pasdar is just immediately attracted to, in exactly the same way that the teenager Jason Patrick in Lost Boys is attracted to Star, the vampire there. And all of this
But
has a
I
very
feel
go ahead.
like well, no, let you finish your thought, because I feel like this is going to change the subject slightly.
Okay, all right, and that's totally
So
fine. But because it's kind of, I don't know how much further I could take the concept, but I kind of feel like the driving around at night, sort of Footloose style. The teens are out and everybody's sort of heated up. That's something that both Lost Boys and Near Dark did, and considering they came out so close together, I feel like they're part of that same breath in a period of time, especially for those of us who were teenagers when these movies came out. But anyway, go ahead.
I think the other, like compare and contrast. I think one
This
of the
is
other
fun.
important
Comparing and
things-
contrast with Lost Boys and Near Dark is an
Well,
awesome.
it had
awesome
to be done. It had to
Yeah.
be done. Once two things in particular. Once we get in to know these vampires, first of all, they all have their own individual hunting styles.
Yeah.
Like, you see Diamondback and Jesse picking up, drifters. You see
Yeah.
Severin picking up young women. Homer, plays up the fact that he looks like a child,
Yeah.
and plays on the sympathies of people. And then you have May doing what May does. But the other thing about them as a pack of vampires versus the vampires in Lost Boys is once we get into their world, these vampires are not nearly as slick and clean as the one in Lost Boys. Like, they spend half of the movie like covered in blood from their recent victims. Like, when they get burnt by the sun, like it takes several scenes for it to like heal up. So you have them like walking around with like burn marks in them.
Yeah.
On
But
them, and
I love
their
the smoke
clothes.
effect that they use, where they have like a smoke machine under their clothes. Fantastic.
However that is
It's
done.
terrific.
Yes.
It's terrific.
Apparently,
but,
there's like
they're
cigars under his
grungy.
shirts.
Yeah, but they're grungy. Like, they're really grungy. Whereas I feel like the vampires in Lost Boys again had that kind of more clean MTV vibe to them.
Yes, I agree. It's more like George Thorogood versus Bon Jovi, right? I mean, like
Definitely,
like-
that's a great analogy.
That works. Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
The other thing about it, comparing this to Lost Boys, though, and how the way vampires operate, is Lost Boys very much takes place in a universe where there is pop culture about vampires.
yeah, that's right.
I
right,
don't know that exists in this movie because they never use the word vampire,
Yeah.
and everybody seems really confused about what they're dealing with. And I think if you were able to ask Catherine Bigelow and ask Eric Red, who was one of the screenwriters, like, do vampire movies exist in the universe of Near Dark? I think they would say no.
You're probably right. Yeah, go ahead, Tony.
Well, I had several things actually. On that note, I think that it takes place in the world where maybe there's been vampire movies, but it's all fiction or hokum. Like, and nobody wants to admit, especially in a small town, that something that monstrous could exist.
Yeah.
That's my take. I find it also fascinating, Jason, that you said that, May is this languid person. When that's not till later. Like, when we meet Star, she's hip and cool and alternative and slightly hippie. Whereas May, her hunting MO is to kind of be awkward and like, oh, I'm just here in this small town.
See, I didn't
feeling."
take it that way. I mean, I suppose.
No, man,
I'm eating a cone from the local Dairy Queen.
Yeah, like, oh,
I don't know. She
like,
seemed manic pixie dream girl.
I disagree. I thought that she was just extraordinarily attractive in a character. I mean, I suppose attractive in an attractive sense, but attractive in a you instantly are
Dream
drawn to this
girl
person and how
sense.
fucking weird she is. I mean, she's so like, she doesn't walk straight, but she doesn't seem high per se. She just seems really spacey, and it's interesting.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, she
But
seems like
she's
sorry, my sound was going out. She seemed like a manic pixie dream girl to me, because she's just so odd with the whole weird thing about the stars and and just everything she says is just kind of a little weird.
Yes.
So she's not, I don't think she was really that awkward or nerdy, but more just kind
I
of
didn't say
odd. So that's why,
nerdy.
that's why manic pixie dream girl comes to mind, because it's kind of a cool,
See,
cool weird.
I thought it came across to me more because Star comes across as like, hey, I kind of know, like, her confidence in her
Where it's at. Yeah, I
hippiness
get it. Yeah, that's
is-
true.
Whereas May is kind of like, hey, I'm just here, guys. Like, it's a different vibe altogether.
I
And-
suppose you're right.
But languid isn't what I would use, but I till maybe later when she is talking, but the whole way she's introduced is way different.
Mm.
Well, he comes on really strong, and she carries herself like, she's
Right.
a little weird, but she
Yeah.
also is somebody that knows the whole time that she has an upper hand. And if you
Absolutely.
go back and watch those scenes knowing that, I think it changes the
Well,
context a little bit.
yeah, I really hated how we meet. What's the main character's name again? The guy.
Caleb.
Caleb. I hate
Adrian
that
Pasdar.
because he starts off being like, like he's kind of like, oh, she's really cute and I like her. Then he gets all weird and rapey, which really bothered me. And then he's like, kind of like, okay, going along. I don't know. His character is my least favorite character in the whole movie, because he was kind of inconsistent. Like you don't know if he's
Yeah.
a decent guy or kind of a sleazebag. I don't know. It's really strange.
Well, I don't think
He
he
is-
knows whether he's a decent guy or a sleazebag.
Exactly.
I agree.
I think he's still figuring himself out.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of I think in general it's a little inconsistent. I also do agree that I love how they're dirty most of the time in this movie.
Mhm.
Like they're
Yes.
either burned up or road dirt or are bloody. Like there's not a lot of like cleanliness to these
Yeah.
vampires.
Which
And I
is
think
consistent with the
until Severin decides he's got to go pick up victims, and then he cleans up and puts on his two-stepping clothes.
Puts on
I thought that was great.
clean shirt.
Yeah. But
They to me are more kind of like authentically punk rock feeling to me, like
Mm.
I feel like the and again, I do like Lost Boys. Like, don't believe me, go back and listen way back to our Lost Boys episode. I like
Sure.
Lost Boys.
Oh,
But
I
feel
don't
like
I believe you completely. Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like these people have a more lived in quality to them. Like especially Lance Henriksen's character Jesse.
Yeah.
Like he plays him in such a way that it's not just this costuming and everything. Like he feels like there's
No,
just
he
this
totally embodied it. He fought for the South, and you believe it.
Well,
And he
we
lost.
when
lost.
people say there's always a joke about, hey, show me something that is grounded. Show me a grounded version of this or that or the other thing. This is a good example of what that probably could mean, which is, show me something where the rules seem like what it would be like if it were actually in my neighborhood. I mean, a difficulty is that, like any crime show, like In Cold Blood, right, where you're following these two guys as they plot to break into a house and kill a family, your characters, in a way, your characters are the crime family, and so you're following them, and so you're forced to kind of sympathize with them. And I have to say that's actually one of the things that's hardest for me. I know that sounds super lame, but I mean, I'm like, I relate very heavily to Tim Thomerson, the guy who the guy who works with animals and just wants to live on a farm and not be an asshole to people. Like a guy like that has a hard time wrapping his head around these people who roam from town to town, basically in a crime movie, robbing and raping and doing whatever it is that they do. He's not one of them. And unfortunately, I am more like Tim Thomerson, and it's hard for me to want to hang out with Bill Paxton in this bar.
Whoa, you aren't.
I don't
but
think-
that's the thing. You aren't supposed to.
Yeah.
Man, like I mean, we're there. That family's there for you to go. Whoa, these people are. These vampires are evil. But it's
They're
also
evil,
about the
yeah.
seduction of innocence, right? Like Caleb hangs out with them because of May, and his arc is, ooh, maybe this.
That's
isn't a
right.
fun
It
time.
absolutely
But
is.
it's the seduction of innocence. Like it's the evil. Like, hey, you can live forever, and as long as we're hanging out, and it sucks to have to kill people, but
And that wouldn't work if they weren't charismatic.
Yeah.
Right.
Like that's the thing. Like, they have to be at least somewhat appealing for this to work. And the other thing I think this is doing, and I think, you have to look back at like other, not just vampire films, but monster films from the 80s, which a lot of things were doing, in part, I think, in reaction to Stephen King, is that they were taking these classic monsters and just dropping them in the middle of America. So that changes the context. You had Fright Night, which is basically Rear Window with a vampire. Then you had Lost Boys,
Yeah.
which is MTV hip cool vampires, and this, which is like the grungy vampire, Western. And I think this sort of recontexting of what a vampire is in America, because like prior to Salem's Lot sort of popularizing the idea of a vampire in the United States, like we still think of vampires very much in the context of like Stoker, and then through
European
that like
castles
Universal and
so
Hammer,
forth.
people in capes and
Well,
that
and to
kind
both
of
of your
thing.
points,
And
these are the bad guys, right? And to some extent, we're following, because even as I hear myself saying what I said earlier, the truth is, those are your characters, and there are people who have T-shirts with those characters on them. But Caleb is your main character, and Caleb is going through a journey where he's like, well, I can hang out with this gang, or I can decide in the end I'm going to have to break away from the gang, and which makes it a classic crime
to your
movie,
point to your point about people walking around with like the T-shirts and everything, that's no different than any other horror movie. Like, when you buy a Hellraiser T-shirt, you don't get one with Kirsty on it.
That's
you get
true.
One with Pinhead on it. Like,
you're so right. Yeah, that's right.
Monster kids are gonna monster kid. You want the cool looking special effect on your T-shirt.
And again, X amount of people are gonna see a cautionary tale, and X amount of people are gonna see it as an instruction booklet.
Yeah.
And I do sometimes wonder. I do sometimes have issues where I go, whoa there, buddy. Like that's. You've got your instruction booklet mixed in with the cautionary tale part.
You mean like the Joker groupies?
Like people, Brohams, Wolf of Wall Street, where after I watched it was like, oh no, this is like, too many people, like that car scene is hilarious, and too many people are gonna see it as like, look how fun it is. Maybe don't be this guy. There's a lot of Scarface shirts. There's a lot of Scarface shirts that are like, I don't think you're supposed to want to be Scarface, but I
think it is fine to look at a movie monster, or in this case, the vampires in this movie, and maybe get a little sort of antisocial wish fulfillment out of
I can buy
watching
that. I can
these
totally
scenes.
buy that.
But you do have to like take a step back and go, but that is fantasy. Right. I live in reality, and it's not okay to like slice up a bartender just because he's given me guff or something.
Well, there's also
right.
at this point, where we see that Severin's in full metal, leather jacket attire, punk rock attire, more metal in way, but also, so you're living in a small town, you might go, ha ha, take that, kickers. You wouldn't persecute me if I was a vampire. I would show you. On the flip side, you have Lance straight up going, I fought for the South. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But which has its own set of Americana who will be like, I hear you, Lance Hendrickson. If I was a vampire, you know what I would do. So,
Go ahead, Drew. I'm sorry, you're trying to say something. Go ahead.
Well, talking about like the aesthetic, like I see this reverberated a lot. Like they probably wouldn't have used the word back then, but like I always, when I watch this, especially versus Lost Boys, like to me, I think cowpunk, which is this sort of weird mixture of like punk / metal look, but like. Like Bill Paxton has like his leather jacket and sunglasses.
I'm not familiar
on,
with the movie,
but he also,
but
well, like it's like he's also got his like cowboy boots and spurs, and so there's.
I kind of get the idea once you say it. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's that's to me what these characters look like, but again, I don't think they would have used that back then. Like, I think,
that was
so much a term.
Like although I don't see. For me, growing up, like punk was definitely not a popular thing where I grew up. There were no punks that I could. There were only I think there were a couple. There were some people maybe in Tylertown listening to punk rock and stuff like that. But I don't see as much the punk rock movement in it as I do like just being an outsider, which is partially punk rock, but also metal kids got, me being one, got short shrift during this time period as well, right? So I personally see a little less of that and more just the outsider. And also, I mean, he's a sociopath. Like, he's the perfect vampire guy for this group. Because
Well, I mean, he's definitely an influence on you're talking about Buffy, or Jason was talking about Buffy earlier. He's definitely an influence on Spike when we first
That's what I'm saying.
see
Yeah,
him.
that's what I was saying.
When Angel goes bad,
Kiefer,
you know, the sort of sadism and stuff like that.
Angelus.
Yeah, right. When Angel becomes Angelus, there's all this kind of stuff like playing with corpses and being an asshole and you know, and I get the wish fulfillment thing, by the way. I don't want to pretend for a moment that I'm not susceptible to that as well. I totally get it. Like this, you know, what if you were
Jason, to your point, everybody, even like the most hardcore horror fan, is actually probably more like Tim Thomerson in this movie.
Sure.
No matter as much as we would like, as much as we would like to think of ourselves as like the vampires or whatever, like unless you are a psychopath, you are not that.
Well, there's a bunch
and
of
you should be
people
grateful.
in
I
horror
suppose you're right.
groups who, again, there's a bunch of people in horror groups who are like, I'm the edgiest, like I like, and those people I kind of roll my eyes at. Like, I'm just like, okay, man, sure, but but they'll have like kids. Like, I want everything good for my kid. And you're like, well, but do you want this other chaos? And like, I don't understand. But in general, there's a bunch of memes about going to a horror convention and how many smiles there are. And
do you want to hear my funniest?
All
horror?
of that, which is great and true. Yeah,
it's true. I mean, the horror fans are actually very sweet people. I mean, always.
Yeah.
That is absolutely true. People who are the most into Stephen King and Stephen King himself are very, very decent people. Having said all that, when you say that, you and I experienced, to me, one of the funniest edgelord moments I've ever seen, which is that we were at an all-night thing where they showed High Tension and you know, where guys are getting their heads squished and a guy's fucking a severed head and all kinds of things going on. And then everybody's like, yeah, bring it on. And then they showed Teenaged Mother, which included a live birth with an episiotomy, and I mean, they ran from that theater. I mean,
that was amazing to see. Like, just
they're like, not appropriate, dude.
All of these people, some of them may have been exposed to that anatomy or not. I don't know, but like
none of them have been exposed to it in that particular.
No,
except for when they were actually born.
And I mean, I had not seen that procedure, and I would not watch it again. But boy, was that an amazing moment in cinema history to see so many people who just profess to be the that's
tough guys,
and just turn green, leave the theater. A bunch of people also, that was shown right in the middle of the night, so some people were dozing off, so they woke up to full on birth and episiotomy, and that was also like, oh man, that was one for the ages.
Yeah.
That was one for the ages.
But it endears me, in a sense, a little bit more to the community, because I realize, oh wait, everybody's full of shit. Like, everybody's full of shit. Even the people who seem the most not full of shit are full of shit. And that actually gives me some hope, because I haven't walked around life going, am I the only one who's full of shit? And no, turns out everyone is walking around hoping that they're not found out. So that made me feel better.
But oh man, that was amazing. I'm not saying I would want to watch. I mean, I myself am not thrilled to watch episiotomy. I by the way, I learned my limits where I'd watch a lot of horror movies, and I went to a career day.
Yeah.
And I just went into the dental one.
Oh,
and they straight up showed somebody extracting a tooth, putting in a screw so that you could screw the tooth on into the bone. And man, I thought I'd seen enough stuff. Oh, that I don't know what it was. It was too real. It was real, and it was too real. And I put my head on. I thought I would like, and there were plenty of people around me, and I'm like, what's wrong with me personally? But I did not. My brain or something. I was not prepared for full on tooth extraction and all of that digging at bone and stuff like that. So yeah, I learned my limits.
I mean, there are also what we don't even realize is that we even have on or off hours and days and months and
Sure.
years where it could be you could have just gone through a terrible breakup, and at that point you could be walking out of a movie that is about a divorce or something, and then another year you're past that or you're not there yet, and so it doesn't hit as hard. Same thing with anything else, and so I apologize for us getting far afield. I think we were back at, can you watch, or is anybody really watching Bill Paxton being a psycho vampire, slicing people up and making jokes and laughing, or are we sort of laughing past the
I
graveyard? Is it
think
just
I
a
mean
thing
I
that we
think
do?
it's there's X amount of people who are gonna think that's awesome and that changes their life and how
I
they
mean,
want to do things. And
he
then there's
is
other people who are
funny.
like, yeah, I get it, you know.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
is
yeah.
funny. Like he's
Absolutely.
entertaining to watch. Like and I something I talk a lot about online about comic book villains, like because like okay, so like yeah, the Joker has come up a couple of times. Like there's a lot of discourse around the
Hmm.
Joker these days, and the thing that I often say is it's perfectly fine to think the Joker is funny and entertaining in the context of fiction. It's perhaps not okay to think that that is behavior that you should emulate. And
Yeah.
I
Right.
think most people can watch a movie like this and look at Severin and laugh, and while you're
Sure.
watching the movie be like, oh, that character is awesome. And he is an awesome character, and Bill Paxton really just like goes all fucking in, like
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
but like I 90% of people I don't think walk away thinking I'm gonna go put on some spurs and slit a
Right,
bartender's neck to drink his blood.
right.
Like I don't think that happens.
Absolutely,
um
absolutely. Yeah, yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I have another thought that I want to throw out, and this strikes me as a very personal one. Is I think the reason Lost Boys was more exciting to me is it was much more fantasy oriented, and not just
Hmm.
fantasy in terms of the slow motion and the sort of superhero-y nature of the vampires in a sense, even though they're bad guys, the superpowers that they have, that's true, but also it takes place in a fantasy world to me. Like I don't know shit about you know a carnival on the West Coast. I don't know anything about that. But let me tell you, I know Tim Thomerson's farm. I mean, I know those Oklahoma towns. I mean, I felt like
Um
this could be our
yeah.
town.
Oh, no, no. Hey, so I was curious. I looked at it online. Maybe I didn't search close enough. Is that a cotton field that they're in? Because it looks like the aftermath of like what's left over when you raise
Did not notice
like
what
the
they were.
bits that are there. I don't know. It looked like because my grandfather had a cotton farm, and I was just I watched this on my projector at home and was like
Yeah,
then paying attention to that. And I'm like, I was trying to figure it out.
I
Nobody
didn't
really had
I
an
didn't pay attention to it.
answer that
It's
I
a really good question. I bet we could figure it out.
yeah,
Um,
looks like the aftermath, all the little bits that are left behind,
yeah.
and how it's raised when because
I
you don't do
think
that during the winter,
Hmm.
basically, or not really.
What was that,
I
Drew?
think what you're saying is accurate. Lost Boys is definitely there's something more accessible about it because it feels a lot like it's bigger than life, right? And it's also like there's this and we saw this a lot, starting from like say like Fright Night and Monster Squad and movies like that, where you had a monster movie where your horror fandom allows you to transverse and stay ahead of the monsters.
Hmm.
This movie doesn't have that. Everybody is essentially clueless. But also, like, I think if you did grow up in a rural area, as we all did, I think that adds an extra level of scariness to it, because it's sort of like, I remember, a few times when I was in high school watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and than having to drive in
Mhm.
between. Like I had been visiting, one of my friends in the next town over, and then driving back to my hometown and being on those back Texas woods all of a sudden, and looking to side, and there just being nothing for
Oh,
for
yeah.
miles,
Oh,
and
yeah.
Oh,
and
Yeah.
wondering what could be out there. And this movie really taps into like sort of the nothingness of rural America. And like it's got that sort of you're off the edge of the map, here be monsters
Oh,
quality
yeah. Excellent
to
point.
it.
Yeah. Well, that's a fun idea that in the world is getting more mechanized and more technological. That if you drive far enough out of the main cities, you're gonna be off the map. People aren't gonna be able to locate you, and you're gonna run into more, as you said, more monsters.
Well, scary things. Yeah. No, every time I'm on a dark road in the woods or a dark road in the country, I'm 100% sure that there's going to be like a Jason or Michael Myers or some other kind of monster that's going to be standing in the street, or like a scary clown. I'm 100% certain of it. And Jason's always like, no, it's not. It's fine. No, I'm like, no, I'm freaking out, man. We got to get out of here.
Yes.
by
I
the
hate
way,
it so much.
if you want to see my version of that, and just go to Google Maps and look up Salem, Mississippi, and then start scrolling out at the roads and the trees around there, and you can see if you look from Salem, Mississippi to Macomb, Mississippi, and you want to see anything could pop out of the woods, the roads
Yeah.
in the woods, like do that, because that was my drive.
Seriously, no, that's
45 minutes, like,
Jason's family farm is like
yeah.
that too, where there's like nothing forever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Well, and there's like
no, you're good.
this like the fact that this is also playing into Western movie tropes, I think,
Mhm.
plays into that, because you have like these, as Caleb is trying to get home, but he seems, he is now changed. You have these people, particularly like local law enforcement, that are off put by him.
It reminds me of what we were talking about today with our kids about whether, sometimes the point of the movie is that rural towns are scary because, they're bigoted and closed minded. And sometimes the point is that leaving the small town is scary because who knows what's out there and the unknown, and here's where your family is. And I'm trying to figure out in this one, I think it seems to be saying stay home where it's safe, because that's where he goes back to, and his father gives him the blood transfusion and everything
Yes.
is good again. So this one seems to be more of a, those people from the big urban cities or whatever, they're scary and you
But
don't want to mess with that or whatever. I don't know where the foreigners,
but they're
strangers,
not.
whatever.
Yeah, I think you're kind of right. I take it as a different thing, though, is
Mhm.
because they are kind of well versed, or they're from these areas. Like maybe Homer's not. It's possible, entirely possible that Homer's not, but maybe.
Well,
But
Severin might not
I
be either.
saw it
Do we know
more
where Severin's from?
as
Oh, but go ahead.
I mean, I'm sure there's enough. There's probably internet discussion
Yeah.
more than enough about that. But
Yeah.
is when, especially growing up where you're kind of isolated. So I think Drew could, I don't know, maybe you'll think I'm right, or maybe you'll think I'm full of it. But the idea is that there's this alternate family that you adopt or you
Right,
get
chosen
into. And
family,
that
found
can be
family.
that can definitely be, but the home part is less about the big city people, because they're not big city people.
Mhm.
And more about like that family that you adopt that you think are cool. Maybe they're not the best idea for you. Like the real home, your real home is your home, right?
Right.
Because I
Well, that's what
also
I'm
will
saying.
hang out with
Sometimes
people
the
like,
found family is the only good family, and sometimes the real
I
family is
think
the
in
good
Right.
this
family.
one he sort of ends up having his cake and eating it too, because
well, yeah.
he takes the one sort of actually cool member of this vampire tribe and brings her back home with him.
So
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
well, part of, because for part of when I was growing up, there was an X amount of, metalheads or outcasts or whoever who also kind of had the attitude of like, screw everybody else and they're all against me, and I'm gonna, do drugs to kind of self-medicate, and I'm gonna, be a rabble rouser. And so my parents were always like, are you like, I hanging out with like the rabble rousers and stuff, like you potentially are going to get into bad trouble with, not just people, maybe the law.
Maybe the
And
latter.
I've always been a really boring, straight edge goody two shoes, despite everything. Like that's just me.
Mhm.
I'll own up to that. So I had to assure, like, look, I'm gonna be the voice of reason here sometimes. But I also, was part of that. Like, yeah, a lot of people, and I don't blame them for you're stuck in a small town. Like that rebellion is just something that is, but I know a couple people who took it to the extreme and really did some damage and were harmful to themselves and others, right?
Yes.
But that, so I had to kind of navigate this, like, you know what? I don't think I'm gonna go out with you and do X, Y, and Z.
There
But I do
are
like hanging
moments.
out and playing video games and like listen to metal and not hanging out with, and I don't like being attacked by preps and I don't like, all of that. But also there were times where I made different choices, like, because again, I've always been the like goody guy in the group. It's kind
Well, I
of
mean,
boring, I guess, but it's how
no, I mean
I don't
the
know,
funny
it's
thing
how
is,
I've
Tony,
navigated things.
I mean, your life goes on and you realize eventually that this is the life that you're living. In other words, you're not living a half-assed version of somebody else's life. You're living 100% of Tony Savaggio's life. So whether you're engaging in whatever other people are doing or not, you are not. There is no. If there's a multiverse, we can't access it. That's what Julia said the other day. So
Yeah.
this is we are
Well,
you are 100% your own, and this is really
I
the
am
world that
me
you're
to a
living.
fault.
Right.
That I will admit. Like if there's maybe some good stuff. There's definitely stuff where I'm like, well, maybe I could take a few more risks here or there or whatever. I don't know. But like, yeah.
To your
I
point,
developed that. I developed that by, and again, we should talk about the movie, less about me, but
But what
I
Drew was saying
developed
something.
that over the time because that's just, I was alone for a lot of times.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I think again,
To
that's
your
why this
point-
film resonates with me is that dichotomy.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Drew. Sorry.
Well, that's what I say. To your point, I don't think that this movie really fully commits to like biological family or found family, because like Caleb as a character, when you first see him, like, yeah, he like hangs out all night with the boys, like he's a little bit rebellious from his dad, but he's
A little bit
he's
rapey.
not a punk rock. There is a point where he is like, and I thought about this while I was watching this. There's two things with his character building like that I thought was interesting. So when he's trying to get home and he's like he's burning up in the sun and he's covering himself up, the vampires come along in their RV and they scoop him up, but his cowboy hat is knocked off and it's left behind him. So as he's joining these sort of people who are on the fringes of this society, a little bit of his old identity is left behind.
That's a great point. I love that.
When he is cured of his vampirism later, and he goes off to face the vampires and save his sister, what does he do? He gets up on a horse and he becomes a full-on Western movie hero.
Yeah,
right.
Totally.
And he's reclaimed his identity, but he's sort of also leveled up a little bit.
That's right.
And
I totally agree.
I never thought about that until now.
That's a great
it's
point.
It's
I'm
a
with you.
wonderful
I'm with
bit
you.
of visual.
He's like a prince
Yeah,
as
and
he's
it's
returned,
it's
and he's
And that's the only way to
say
solve the things too, right? Was his know-how, because at that point they've wrecked they slashed all the tires. So his only recourse has become, everything he's learned
riding in on a
his
white
time
horse
on the ranch. Yeah, right.
Wow. I wanted to mention. Well, actually, one more thought about what Julia was saying about the country versus the city and all that stuff. It is funny how movies are constantly weaving back and forth with which is more scary, the city or the country. Like in we watched Crowhaven Farm, which, man, we got to watch more movies like Crowhaven, because there's I love any movie like that, but there's all these movies of the late 70s where families move to the country and learn to regret it, and, and because small towns are scary. And then there's also all these movies about how a single God, there's like 80 movies a year about a single woman moves to the country and finds out that that's where real life and real love can be found because the
or where
city
people
will
go to
betray
the
you.
city and horrible crimes happen, or horrible
Right,
gang
right, like
gang
Patrick
violence or
Swayze
whatever.
in Next of
Yeah,
Kin. Yeah, he comes out of he comes out of the mountains and goes to the city because he has to deal with the bad people there.
country
I
boy
think there are
encounters
far more
gangs.
hick.
Go ahead.
I think there are far more exploitation horror
Uh-huh.
films than there are the other way around. Because
Horror
and that's
films,
why you have.
yes, but not action films. I think action films think the city is a scary place, and horror films think the country is a scary
Huh.
place.
That's
That is
let's
probably true.
I've never thought about that, but let's play with that for a second. Is that true? That sounds true.
Well, because whenever you think of any action film, it's like you go in, you're in the city, and suddenly there's gangs and the mob and all this, like just
Yeah,
bad actors, doing
Well,
doing drugs and stealing cars and whatever.
that's true.
think about like some movies we've reviewed even on this show, like Predator 2 or RoboCop. Like
Yeah.
they show the city as hell on earth.
Yes.
Right.
And I think that was definitely a thing in the 80s because like even like Tim Burton's Batman is sort
Yes.
of set up like that. But
And
you
notice
know,
how many
in
times
the
there
horror
are.
genre,
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Continue.
no, I was going to just say in the horror genre, though, I definitely think it leans more towards, people from the country are inbred and psychotic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it could very well be that there's really nothing to this. That it's just you sit down at the typewriter and you go, "Who am I exploiting today?" And you just decide this time it's going to be
Well, the
Scary
truth
Hicks.
is there are bad people
Right.
in small towns, and there are bad people in the city, and it just depends on like your misfortune and running across them. I think
Yeah.
with this particular film, because we're dealing with vampires, I don't know that Bigelow is trying to say anything so much about small towns, except that it would be easy for drifters to be picked off and not be missed if there
For sure.
were a
For
group
sure.
of vampires operating this way.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
look where
Well,
Adrian Pasdar's character comes from. He has a family. He has a family that's looking for him. So he's
yeah,
not one of those drifters.
right.
He's
Well,
probably a
Drifters
stupid
definitely.
victim. Yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
well, Drifters definitely. But I do like, again, going back to it, the idea of this kind of like good natured, like when Severin gets dressed up, I can't come back to that because I was like, wow, that is because he looks the part. If
Yeah.
you look like an outsider, you look like a drifter, you come into town, you're not going to have a good time of it.
Yeah.
Right. But he's navigating, like when he's dressed up in his leather duds, he's there to make everybody around have a bad time.
Yeah.
When he's dressed up, ready to go to the honky tonk, he's there to lure.
It's
And
so
I think
great of
that's
you to notice
fascinating.
that because I actually had not paid attention
Well, I
to
didn't really
to
think about it until I watched it this time. Was like, oh, that's how they do things, right?
yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's how that's how he's learned to pray and move back and forth between this. It's like, some friends of mine would have a harder time because I mean I drive super safe when I go visit my parents, but
Yeah.
I can also, if I want, put my hair under a hat, whereas other friends of mine can't do that and are gonna have a bad time in a small town because it's terrible in that area. So that but the way they move about, I think also I don't know if we've talked quite enough about it. The vampire family who's found themselves, I just think it's fascinating. Their lore is also great. Like, we have child vampires dealing with child vampire
I
stuff.
love that kid. I love that kid. I
Yeah,
love him
Homer.
so much. I love that
Homer.
he is physically appears to be a kid, but he is adult in every other way. And that he smokes. He has the attitude of an adult. He says things that adults say. And then, but when he sees Sarah by the vending machine in the middle of the night, he is like, oh, kid like me, I want to make her into a vampire. By the way, they never say the word vampire. I think that's really interesting in this
Yeah.
film.
Yeah.
So I think that's really neat that he recognizes that although he's been around forever, he's still a kid and he needs another fellow kid like him.
Yeah,
It's a
and
very
we see
cool
that we get
character.
to see that in this movie because he's also at that point too. One thing that's fascinating is he kind of decides that after he realized like he can't hold on to May. Like he's
Yeah.
still a kid in all like she's always gonna see him as a kid, despite the
Yeah.
fact that he turned her, despite the fact that they had a good friendship or as
Yes.
good a friendship as you can be when you're a vampire killer, right?
Yeah.
But they have a relationship that's more friendship. So he still really cares for her. It's like because even at the end, we see what's going on with that, where he's infatuated with her. But at this point, he kind of has decided, like, well, this is not working. Now that Caleb's part of it, I'm out.
Yes.
This is not good. But what if I had a kid that I turned
Yeah.
who started out like me, and eventually they'll understand what I feel. And maybe he's
Yeah.
not thinking of it that far. We don't see him thinking about that, but that's the general idea
It's the idea. He
of what
wants
he's
somebody
getting
to be
at.
stuck just like him.
Yeah.
Like in his situation where
But
yeah.
the twist that changes it is losing May to Caleb, or potentially because even though he's like, yeah, thanks for saving us, because there's the part where Caleb saves everybody by quick thinking whenever they're
Yes.
ambushed. But even though he has that, he still realizes like that's not going to go anywhere other than the friendship that they have. Like he because of his state, that's it as far as that goes. And that's I mean, yeah, he's a blood-sucking killer, but also that's pretty awful and poignant.
No, I mean it is, and it hasn't been explored in that many films, so that it's an interesting thing that you don't see it very much. I mean, obviously in Interview with the Vampire,
Sure.
and then can you name any others? I'm sure there are a few, but not many. It's a really interesting idea. And you're right, he's just one of the characters here. So you've got you've got this full set. By the way, this group of the family, except for Homer, when you've got Bill Paxton and Lance Henriksen and Jeanette Goldstein, they were all lifted like just lifted straight out of Aliens and put into this movie. And
Well, I think
Because
that's one of the reasons
because
why they work so well together.
yes,
yeah,
yeah,
because Catherine Bigelow was already dating James Cameron, I guess, or at least they knew each other really well. So he was like, "Hey, why don't you just these guys are done. Why don't you just use them?" Which I
yes,
think is awesome.
sort of amazing. I mean, that's just this wonderful accident. It gets you this cast that are Jeanette Goldstein is a
Well, and they have
fascinating actress, by the way. I love
Yeah.
her. Go ahead.
they have
Sorry.
so much chemistry together, and I think that
Yeah.
works because they have worked together before.
Yeah.
Like they already do feel like a family.
Sure.
Even though the characters are extremely different than the
Oh, yeah.
characters they played in Aliens. Like they are, miles apart from one another, with the exception of maybe Severin being a bit, over the top in his Bill Paxtonness. But
Yeah, he's just
like,
Chet as a vampire.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I love as great as Bill Paxton is, I love Lance Henriksen
No, I thought he was
in
great.
Oh
this.
yeah, he's always wonderful. He's wonderful in B movies. He's wonderful in A movies. He's good in everything he shows up in.
That
I mean,
show that he
Well,
did.
we
Yeah.
talked a lot about movies where they hire people with good faces.
yeah,
Like this movie has, last week we were talking about that with Captain Kronos. This is also true with this movie. Like the collection of people that they got to be these vampires, they're all interesting looking. Like especially Lance Henriksen just has like he's so gaunt and
Yes.
leathery looking.
Yeah,
And
he
he's
is
excellent
remarkable
at being
looking, yeah.
the patriarch as well. And
Absolutely.
how he plays how he holds that together. And Homer may be the original, but it's his character, it's Lance Henriksen's character that really he knows when to use Severin to get what he needs. Like I just let him do his thing and he's gonna be the instrument, right? And how to kind of manipulate Homer in a way, like in his relation. I think there's a lot of just really great choices in how they all gel together and how they have stayed this pack,
Well-
and have brought May into it, and then Caleb, that kind of hazing of like, yeah, I don't think this guy's gonna work out. We should kill him,
Yeah.
just for self-preservation. But then just, what are we gonna do? We're gonna share meals. Like it has the idea of we have to stay together and be a tight group because it's us against the world.
Well,
Yeah.
that's also plays into the Western movie-ness of
Absolutely.
this, because like this is a gang of outlaws. Like it's no
Yeah.
accident
Yeah,
that
they're an
his
outlaw
name.
gang. That's right.
Well, it's no
Yes.
accident that his name is Jesse.
Right, right,
he
exactly.
could be Jesse James, and there's that point where they're all like squaring off against the cops in that hotel room.
Yes.
And it's in the middle of the day, and they're shooting
such a
and they're
great
giving their
sequence.
yeehaws. Yeah, but
This
like
could have been a 1930s gangster movie.
well,
when
like
that happened.
the way they operate, and that is the way that Caleb proves himself to them, is by running out into the sun and getting the van.
Yes.
That is very cowboy movie. Like
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
then, and it's such an amazing sequence, and also just the way their weakness to sunlight is used is fascinating.
Yeah, no, that's what I was talking about. Because each bullet hole becomes an extra danger
Yes.
to them.
Yes,
Right.
that's so
Not-
right.
And
it's
that's
not a danger-
amazing.
It's not a danger to their bodies because they're impervious to bullets, but it's a danger to them because of the sun. Yeah, I think it's interesting that that's literally the only thing, other than the fact that they need blood to survive, that is really a vampire thing. Because everything else
Right.
they don't have. I don't think you ever have anything about like a stake through the heart. You do have the sunlight and the burning, and you have the blood, but you don't have fangs. You don't have any
Well,
kind of
and
religious thing.
their vampirism appears to be some kind of a bloodborne illness that can be.
That is the
Can be
one.
transfused out,
That
yeah.
is the one thing I said this when I was doing my opening thoughts. That is the one thing that I don't like about this movie, is that I feel like it is way too easy to be cured of being a vampire.
I think it's interesting though. I
Yeah, me
think the idea of it is pretty fascinating, and I think the idea that his dad could have, had medical background to kind of make that happen. I still like my you should shut your brain up moment is how does he know what blood type and where did he get all the blood?
No, I think he gets it from himself. I think he just takes blood from himself and puts it in, and there, in which case he should match because,
Yeah, I
his
guess.
dad's likely it's high.
I guess May lucked out. I don't know. But again,
Oh,
that's
yeah,
stupid.
May. Yeah,
That's
true.
stupid.
May is sort of where I also like what pushes it over the line, because like Caleb hasn't been infected that long. So with the way vampire fiction normally operates, like he hasn't killed anybody yet, like that. I can sort of hand wave that, but
yeah, the May thing is harder, right? I agree.
Well, she's been a vampire for like 4 years, but it almost feels in the same way that there was a happy ending to Live and Die in L.A. And that somehow got quashed, but it was a fight at the studio as to whether they were going to release the happy ending or the spoilers for To Live and Die in L.A., the ending that we got. And the happy ending, everything just sort of miraculously works out. And that's what happens here. And maybe it's just, I'm guessing, I mean, only Catherine Bigelow will know, right? But I'm guessing that it's studio requested. Can you please give us a happy ending? Can he get to keep the girl? And
well, one part of the ending was going to be that Sarah would step out in the sun and she would her arm would start burning, and so she's been turned. But again, she could just be turned back because with the blood transfusion, so not that big a deal. So yeah,
I think my only complaint watching it this time was once we get definitely third act, it all kind of really just goes super fast, and some of the choices don't seem to be. They seem to just like, oh well, here we're gonna do this. They don't seem as well. Also, Caleb has this miraculous ability to run really fast and catch up to cars sometimes when he needs to. And other times they go far away. I don't know. Again, this is my like, come on, Tony, it's a movie. Just shut up, like kind of thing. But like noticing those things this time around. By the way, I also, if I had to if I could do a Q&A and raise my hand on this movie, I really, at the end where the car bursts into flames and there's sparks, I do want to find out if they really took out the electricity for the neighborhood with that. Because it really did look like that was real, and that's what happens. Like, those power lines out in the middle of nowhere. I definitely was curious this time around. Like, did you sabotage the power for that area?
Yeah, excellent, excellent,
With that
excellent question.
scene. I mean,
Yeah.
it looks awesome. I don't know. Maybe it was fake. Maybe it was. But if it wasn't, oof. Because getting the power company out there, it looks far enough out that's gonna kind of suck to fix.
I
But I
wanted
guess
to.
that's things an adult worries about, which is
Yes.
dumb. Because it looks great too. Like, it looks awesome on film, and that adds, like, when it hits, it seems it's one of those things where if you listen to enough stuff about movie making, and you go, hey, we had one shot to get the car shot, and then we shouldn't have let the car park under those power lines. That was a misstep, and did it. Or maybe it was maybe they did a really good job and just faked it, but it seemed real enough. And that was one of those things that I just started thinking. I just noticed this time around. I was like, I would totally ask about that.
I wanted to mention before we moved on to final thoughts. Adrian Pasdar, who I know from Heroes, right? And so it was so interesting to see him as such a young person here. But when he's playing basically a strung out vampire victim wandering through the bus station and kind of barely being able to put one foot in front of another, and pasty and barely strong enough to like paw some money together and stuff like that, I completely believed it. I was so impressed with this actor in playing
I'm with you.
strung out. I mean, he was so good, and I felt you could just see how much like this character's stomach was hurting. I'm just impressed with the acting job he did. This is not somebody who
I
I've
agree with
seen,
that. Yeah, I thought he did seem, because I wasn't super impressed with him the whole time, but I did feel like he seemed genuinely terribly ill.
Yes, yeah. So
I
that
kind
was
of did wonder this time too, since I was watching it up close on a slightly larger screen, like the detective and his bandaged up kind of mangly hand. Like, what had he been up to?
Yeah, good question.
That is a really bizarre detail that is just like, it makes me think there must be a deleted scene.
Yeah, deleted
almost.
scene. Yeah.
Maybe. Or maybe it's just that actor had something happen to his hand, but it was like one of those things. I think we're supposed to get the impression that he maybe hasn't been he doesn't have the best intentions, but anytime I don't know, man, I've dealt with a couple times in rural America, dealt with law enforcement where I was like, oh no, it's gonna be bad.
No, I know.
So like
And in the
watching
end, that
him
guy
kind
gives
of
him
give
some
him a
money.
hard time. Yeah.
I mean, he says, okay, here's $3. Be a good boy. That guy. I forget that guy's name, but he actually plays the intake clerk in ER, and he was like one of the administrators on China Beach, the television show China Beach. Although he was in Vietnam, so I mean, this guy's had a long and interesting career. So,
I mean, he's great as hey, what are you doing here? Are you strung out, boy? Kind of like that whole hit that. That is a character that is like, again, what I think that juxtaposition that we're talking about is there's a lot of the end, like I said, goes really fast to me. And I don't know if a jackknife truck would blow up in the same way. Also in the middle, luckily in the middle of the town, in the middle of an intersection, not into a store. But all of like it tends to ratchet, but there's so much kind of realism and to it, like the grittiness of small hotels and stuff like that is.
By the way, his
is
name,
really...
I apologize. His name is Troy Evans. He's still alive. He's 75 years old. Served in the 25th Infantry Division in Vietnam, and then became a Hollywood actor. And he's on Bosch, so he's still around.
Working actor.
Yeah.
I did want to mention though too, I really enjoy Severin's the gleeful, like almost like the gremlin on Twilight Zone, his gleefulness in disassembling the semi.
Oh, that was amazing.
Like, oh, it's such a good scene, but it really did. I wondered kind of like as I was watching this time, like, was that kind of a little bit of homage to the Twilight Zone episode? I don't know, and more of the movie, but
it was great to see his. So who knows? But his super strength is really neat there when you realize just how strong he is, that he can just rip apart the front of this truck and start ripping
Well,
out
that's
pieces
the
and everything.
Oh, it's so
that's the only sort of vampire power other than imperviousness to
Yeah.
damage. They really display a whole lot of, like they have them like punching people across the room, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why I feel like Caleb has leveled up from being kind of the prick that we meet in the opening scenes, because he's really brave to go against
Yeah, that's
what
true.
he knows that he is completely outgunned.
Yes. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yes. And he's doing, and yeah, it's a true hero. I mean, Catherine Bigelow, you would love to hear her thinking about it out loud and explaining it, because she does move the story. You said it, from sort of the temptation of joining a criminal gang, to going ahead and being a cowboy hat wearing hero, because you want to save your little sister and all that stuff.
Well, I'm curious if you guys have heard that, because I have not seen the DVD, so I don't know if she does the commentary. Does she do the commentary?
No, I have no idea. I don't know. If anybody knows, yeah, I don't know. Good question. All right. So we should get our final thoughts. I mean, we could probably continue to talk about this movie for another hour, but let's go to our final thoughts and then endorsements. So I think we started with Tony, right? So Tony, have we hit on the best stuff? And is there anything else that you would mention?
I mean, I agree that I kind of would love to talk about it for another hour, like go through it kind of more scene by scene, because I think there's so much good stuff. All the stuff where they're on the run. I think, the kind of detective work and also the frustration. It's interesting too, because we have a frustration of even the small town cops don't really care about young people.
Yeah.
Like convincing them, like, my son's a good boy. I think he fell in with the wrong crowd. And they're just kind of like, yeah, I guess,
Over for you.
Yeah. But that feeling, because a lot of times you will have the like, well, he's the guy we know. He works out, he has his ranch. Like, he's a good boy. We should look for his boy. But they're really also in the kids are going to be kids. He's a teenager, but he's also, there's the dichotomy. He's old enough to know what to do. It's his fault for falling in with drifters. Like, what?
Yes.
Come on, man. And like that frustration where he has to take matters into his own hand. That's really interesting in the context of a small town story. There's a lot. I mean, there's, like, again, I do wish we could talk about it for another hour. And I hope also that, I think by now, if people listen to this enough, they know that part of the podcast is us kind of recontextualizing our experiences into horror. So I hope that people are okay with how much digression I had about my own personal feelings about small town, and how this movie especially dredges a lot of that back up. It feels, I see new things each time I watch it. And I think that's, if you can make a movie like that it's going to resonate with different people different ways. But I definitely feel like I don't know why I didn't see this when it was on VHS originally. It took me a little while before I saw it, but
is that so? So you didn't
yeah,
watch it?
I didn't see it in
first time
88 or
around?
89, I don't think. I mean, I might have seen it on cable, but it was a little while after that I actually saw the movie.
Huh.
But I still feel like it baffles me, like, for a movie, like, it doesn't feel as dated as some movies from 87 might feel.
Sure.
In a lot of ways. And I think that's definitely a show of skill. And not that I'd mind if something feels like that, but
oh no, we talk about that all the time, right?
But I think that watching it again, I mean, there's attitudes and there's aspects of it that feel that way, but I think it ages really well, and each time I've seen it recently, which, not every movie does,
Yeah.
and it's why also, it steers clear of a lot, because it's a small town aspect. It steers clear of a lot of just like pop culture stuff.
Yeah.
Even Severin isn't wearing like a modern, like whatever the hot band was, he doesn't have a pin of that. As far as I know, I didn't pay as much attention to his
That's
pins,
a good point. Like in Footloose, they dance to DeBarge when they're out at the Sonic or whatever it is. And there's nothing like that here.
I watched like for example, I saw a new trailer. I think it was the Ninja Turtles trailer, and they're like, oh, I think they look like a Shrek. Well, that you're automatically at, like, it could work in the future, right? But when you make those choices, you're automatically dating that in a way, like that pop culture reference, like, what's a Shrek? I don't know.
I think Shrek is already kind of a dated reference.
And so like I get it, but also when you make those choices, those are choices that may work or may not, right? And I think this film, by the setting and in general, because a lot of small towns are also already behind, like we got fashions later and they left later and all that. Like, I think there's a certain, this could still be going on in a small enough, in an area of Oklahoma or Arkansas,
Oh, yeah.
certainly places in Mississippi where I know, or I've been back, that kind of thing. Or, there's area, don't have to go maybe a little bit north in Texas, right? It feels like it could still kind of be around there. And it just reminds me, I don't know if you guys have checked out, I recommended it, but Blood Relatives. I kind of wish we were doing a double feature of this and Blood Relatives, because they would fit
Blood
together really
Relatives
well.
would work well with this.
Like, it kind of, they fit well together. But yeah, I really dug it, and I just like seeing new aspects that make me think each time I see this movie. So I'm hope to watch it many more times. I would get a UHD of this movie for sure.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. Julia, final thoughts.
I mean, I feel like, that we kind of went around talking about things that weren't necessarily the movie more than we talked about the actual movie. So there's really a lot that we didn't hit. But I think we got the general theme and the themes and flavor of it, pretty well.
I'm resting a lot on this notion that we hit the topics and
Yeah.
that,
No, I'm not saying we should continue to talk about it. I'm just saying I do feel like if anybody's a huge fan of the film, they might be going, "Wow, you guys didn't even talk about whatever, fill in the blank
Right.
thing." So apologies for that. But no, I think it's an interesting conversation for sure. And I'm gonna keep thinking about it after this, because there's a lot of things that we hit on that I'll be like, that's an interesting thought, just like watching other movies and being like, huh, I wonder how this compares. But yeah, it was very cool. I'm not, as we've discussed many times, I'm not the huge gore fan, so not so much a fan of all the slicing of necks and what have you. But it's interesting. It's different than most vampire movies, which is always a good thing. So yeah, enjoyed it.
Yeah. We didn't really talk about the level of gore, but there's actually, it is quite, there's a lot of blood, but it's not from dusk till dawn. I mean, there's no severed limbs being thrown around, so it's
We do
right
get
in the
some
middle.
gnarly effects, like when you get a shotgun to
Yes.
the stomach.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Yeah.
but they use it.
Oh,
I mean, it's used so well. Again, I now in retrospect, I hope people aren't mad at us, but
I
how
don't.
much we talked about contextualizing it, but I really do like the effects are also just really top notch. They hold up as well. Just
Oh, yes, absolutely.
the texture of the film is great. The graininess, the grittiness, the amount of dust, the amount of smoke in a bar. When vehicles kick up dust,
Yeah.
when they have to, all the light that's played when they're in the shootout, and each bullet hole comes through. Just all of that really works well. They really put you in the place, in a hotel room, and how that feels in a rural, motel. All of the just, it's a very tactile movie.
Yeah.
Like, you can feel that, you can taste dust when you're watching it,
Oh God, yes. Yeah.
and that not everybody can do that well. Like, they made a lot of choices that make you really drawn into it and feel that level of reality. And I think that's partially what Drew you were hitting on, as far as the differences between other vampire movies is, this is this really gritty, kind of grimy, real, like, set. It feels very solid. Like, you could just have it be drifters and it would still be horrific, and they wouldn't have to be vampires. But then you add on top of
They could
all of their
be
abilities.
robbers or serial killers.
Yeah. But the fact that they are vampires and have all this stuff going on, adds that extra, like, oh, whoa, we're in this world now. And just that sense of play. And the night shots are beautifully shot, really well lit. Like, they're dark, but you get the impression that it's that, feels like that late in the middle of nowhere lighting, but isn't so dark that you can't see what's going on. Like, everything feels really good. It's sorry, I'm gonna extend this another 30 minutes by talking about all the cool stuff in it.
No. Drew, what about you? Are you with Tony that
I'm kind of with
I
I'm kind of with Tony
yeah,
and
I
Julia.
apologize.
Like
We went
I
very
can
much
go on
along the
about
topics
that.
instead of working our way through and
Well,
okay.
you know, like the ending, like the very ending, this sort of like final battle where you know, the vampire, what's left of the vampire family are attacking him in this station wagon. Like, you know, it's interesting to me that like after all that, like when Diamondback and Jesse see that May has sort of made her choice and Homer is dead, like they basically just commit suicide.
Well, it's
Like, and that's
it's a total Bonnie and Clyde ride or die moment.
Yes.
It's
Oh,
absolutely
yeah.
like feels like
Yeah.
a Bonnie and Clyde shootout, except everybody can turn, like everybody is an explosive weapon, which is amazing.
Bonnie and
Yeah.
Clyde. Yeah, they say good times. But also, didn't not Three from Hell, but the one before that. What was
Devil's Rejects.
Devil's Rejects? Also has that ending. You know.
Mm.
With
Yeah,
Freebird,
and
by the way.
yeah. You know, but like that just as like a moment, and that's the choice they make, you know, with like the big bad of the movie is interesting to me because it's a character based ending instead of more of a, I guess, action based where, you know, Caleb and Jesse square off, which is I think where most movies would have gone with this.
And
But they don't do what
oh, sorry, yeah, I wanted you to complete your thought, but I wanted to add on to that.
you know, I think they sort of chose to have the physical battle be with Severin, which happens earlier, and you know, so this is more, you know, on an emotional level, and I think that's really a cool choice for, you know, the ending of this kind of movie.
Well, it's also really fascinating when I watched this time, and I noticed there's at first there's an ambiguity of is he gonna just run over Caleb and May? Like that's a choice. The other choice would be they could have gotten away.
Yes.
Like there's a way, like they could have hightailed it.
Yeah.
You know, batten down the car like they usually do, even though it was chaos. And instead they choose this kind of ride or die moment to, you know, everything's lost. But there's a moment you see pretty clearly where they probably could have gotten away and it could have just been the Jesse and Diamondback show, right? But all is lost at that moment. And that's, I think that those choices and the way that that plays out and how it's shot, how it's edited, and that story, even though it's fairly brief, is also really interesting because there's like 3 or 4 different ways that whole scene could go. And we get this choice. And I think it works, and each one of those would have worked. But you know, it's compelling. It ends up being the kind of this really kind of bizarrely happy. It's the happy for the humans, but it's poignant and terrible for everybody. Like, but everybody's going to be affected, and also may or may not, the town may or may not have power after this.
Yeah.
This is the other thing. But yeah, I just really that I didn't pick up on. I think the last time I was watching it, I didn't really put myself into that kind of headspace, and I think that all of those choices are interesting considering how there's just multiple ways this could have gone. And I think that grounds it in the way we've been talking about.
That's an excellent point. Drew, did you have any other final thoughts or
you know, I just am glad that we finally got around to talking about this. Like, I am curious where you came around on this, Jason, because I know historically, you know, you have said that you have a hard time with this movie. I'm wondering if this discussion maybe changed your opinion
I
at
mean,
all.
watching it with Julia, I I didn't have a hard time with it the way, you know, like from a moral standpoint. It was more like I just never really got into it, you know. Because and with there's probably a certain amount of clannishness, right? That you know, I was a Lost Boys guy and not a Near Dark guy, and you're kind of always one or the other, which
But
is
no, man, as an
bizarre.
adult, I don't understand that. Like I still
No,
hold
you're
like as an
absolutely right.
adult,
I
you
mean,
don't have to be Marvel or DC. You don't
you don't have to be
you can
Beatles or
like
Stones,
you
right?
know,
Yeah,
you
you
can
can.
like Megadeth and Metallica. I know that's blasphemous, but like that's the freeing part of it. You don't have to just, you can like both and go, man, Near Dark does Americana
Yes.
Western vampires great, and New Wave, like
But you do
awesome
have to
vampires
commit
great.
to either the Next Generation or the original series of Star Trek. I'm sorry.
Nope. I'm gonna buck that system. I can like any damn thing I want, and that is
Yeah.
the beauty of being an adult. It's
Well, I got to admit, you're
amazingly
exactly
freeing.
right. That's
Totally.
where I came around this time, was that I can like this movie, and it doesn't mean I'm being disloyal to Joel Schumacher. You know,
Why would
it's
you? And he doesn't care, Jason.
because
No
he's
one,
dead.
no
for
one
one
involved.
thing. But I
Well,
mean,
no one involved in that
yes,
movie
yes.
cares if you're fiercely loyal to. And
No,
you
I know.
You can
But
play sexy sax all you want and issue Oklahoma, and it's not going to make a bit of difference to anyone involved. Like, you can like both. Seriously.
you're absolutely right. Well, the funny thing is, though, I think we often find this as we go through life, is you can realize, in the same way that the guy used to talk about the parent tapes, that you find yourself saying things and realize, wait, I didn't actually form that opinion. I'm just repeating something my parents used to say. I think we can have sort of our younger self tapes. We can sort of walk around and go, oh yeah, no, I'm a Beatles guy. I'm not a Stones guy, or I'm a Lost Boys guy. And then you realize, well, wait a minute, what I am is a 50-something guy, and that stuff is not relevant to me anymore. And
You mean you can like all flavors of punk rock 80s vampires.
all of it,
Yeah.
yes, all the way from Lost Boys to Near Dark.
All the way.
Wow,
I
that is
that.
open-minded of you.
The breadth of that is so
Yes.
something.
As long as it's got people with fangs. I mean, the
Oh,
funny
these
thing
guys
is,
didn't have fangs, so that I guess
that's
they
a really
got
good point.
go out.
Well, wait a minute, real quick, is that true?
No, they don't have
does
fangs.
Paxton never has fangs?
No.
We
Well, it's
never
funny.
see fangs at the very least. They
Well,
They
and they don't
might
even
have the
they like use like weapons to slice people open, so they don't have to fight them that much.
well, I mean, May definitely
She
bite
bites him,
Caleb.
but it's
Yeah.
like she bites him like a wild animal, not like somebody with fangs.
Because
Anyway,
wild
Yeah, that's
animals
true.
don't have fangs.
Well,
That's what I'm saying.
anyway,
Like regular gnawing, mauling. As
in
opposed
my
to-
mind, there were fangs, in the same way that if you watch Moonraker, everybody in their mind thinks that little girlfriend of Jaws has braces, but she doesn't.
Now we're talking about the Mandela effect.
Yes.
Anyway, there's no fangs. So
Yeah,
yes,
that's it.
we
That's
should-
it for me. Okay, we should move on to endorsements. I'm sure that people will come to the Facebook page and remark on whatever we have missed in discussing this. But talk to me about what you want to recommend. And don't forget, next week we're going to be with the Monster Movie Happy Hour, and I'm so super stoked about that.
Yay.
So Tony,
Huzzah.
Tony, what do you have to recommend for us?
I am late to the game, but I watched the unrated cut of Megan,
Mm.
which I hadn't seen the movie at all, and I was really impressed with some of the nuance to that. Some of the best suit acting from
Yeah.
a person in a suit that has
Yes.
come out in recent memory. Just really, there's a lot of nuance to it that I hadn't expected in the relationships. Also, I've been banging this gong for years and years, where I've been telling Jason things like, what if the robot, which we've had robots that can repair themselves and stuff, what if the robot decides it doesn't like to be turned off? Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't have a context for that. And now I'm like, see the thing I've been telling you? Like, it's right up there on screen for decades, for like a decade and a half at least, if not more. I've been saying, like, why is nobody thinking about the horrible things
I love her
they could do
voice.
with the,
Yeah,
it's great.
when she's like, oh, well, turn off Megan, and Megan goes, now hang on a second, we're having a conversation. That
Yeah.
was scary. That was
all of
really
that stuff,
scary.
man, is just there's a lot to it
Uh-huh.
that I really was, because I mean, anytime there's a super hype on a movie, like I'm definitely not one of those, oh, can't be that good kind of guy people, but there's a certain, like, is it that good? I don't know. And I was really impressed in a way that I haven't been impressed with some other movies. Also rewatched, I think last week I had seen it. Rewatched Project Wolf Hunting. Also, you know what? I also, on the flip side of this, really enjoyed the new Puss in Boots movie.
It is
Which,
cute.
as an animator, I was just blown away by their choices in style.
super cute.
And it tells it's a different aspect of that story. I think it was exactly where it needed to kind of go. I was, I'm and like I said, as a person working in the industry, I have a soft spot I've always had a soft spot for animation. But I think they really did an excellent job with that movie, and saw them kind of back to back. And then I went out as much as I could to some South by shows. If you're looking for new music, I picked up new music from heavy band Gravehuffer. They're really cool. They've been making pretty good waves across music scene, and my good friends Temptress just released their album, and watch them live, watch them play some of the new stuff. The new Temptress album is great. I think they're cool people and they make great music. And then some other friends of mine have just released their album, a band called Slumbering Sun. And they're kind of actually one of the members of Temptress is in it. And they're kind of a local band, and Drew, that's Keegan's band. We have a mutual friend. That's his new thing. In addition, one of our friends is in a band called Destroyer of Light, which actually Destroyer of Light just released their new album too, called Panic. So Temptress, Slumbering Sun, and Destroyer of Light and Gravehuffer, those are all my music recommendations because I caught them they have new albums. I caught a lot of other bands, so it's not just that. But my other favorite band that I saw was anytime, if you're into the same music as I am, if you like what we do at Desert to Mars and you like that desert rock, stoner rock stuff, please, oh please, go see Atomic Bitchwax, which sounds more controversial. The bitchwax being the kind of slang term for the lava lamp, the stuff that's in lava lamps.
Okay.
But if you want to see one of the most amazing bassists, it makes me sometimes want to simultaneously get really good and practice like all the time, just quit my job and practice bass, or just throw my bass in a wood chipper and go, oh, it's been done. The bassist for Atomic Bitchwax, A, they're all cool people. B, amazing live, and super tight. Like all three of the guys are just lockstep amazing. So if you dig on the music I dig on that I've talked about, and Atomic Bitchwax comes to your town, you should go see them because it's quite the live experience. They put on a show and they play just one of the tightest bands I've seen every time. Consummate every time. So anyway, so you got movie recommendations and music recommendations for me.
Fantastic. Julia, what about you?
I thought Shazam 2 was super fun. I enjoyed it so much. I agree that with everybody who says that Zachary Levi's character is very different, completely different person than the kid version of him, the teenager version of him. But other than that, I think it's very fun. I love the goddesses. I love the family. I love the plot. I think it's delightful, and I don't know why anybody gives movies like that a hard time, honestly. Anyway, I enjoyed it.
Excellent. Drew, what about you?
I haven't gone out to see a movie this week. I did see Scream 6 when it came out, but I hardly feel like that needs an endorsement. It's doing well. So I'm not going to spend too much of the time reviewing that. What I did end up watching is since it's 5 hours long, I've been like slowly making my way through In Search of Darkness 3. And, one of the things that I have been doing is, when they discuss a movie that I haven't seen, I will stop watching the movie and go back and watch it. And one of the movies that I have enjoyed the most from this is Without Warning, which is kind of a weird mashup of like an early 80s Friday the 13th style slasher.
It's the one with Martin Landau, right?
An alien. It's an alien invasion movie, and apparently quite influential on the movie Predator.
I wanted us to
it's
do
not
Without
exactly
Warning. We're gonna
like
get there.
Predator. I think Without Warning, if we ever do any do another part of the Predator franchise, I do think it would make for an interesting compare and contrast. But it's a fun movie in its own right. In particular, I think if you compare it to what other horror movies are coming out,
at that time period, but also some of the more interesting aspects of it, like the casting, like the fact that you do have Jack Palance and Martin Landau in
Yeah.
this movie. And the creature effects are also fun and inventive. So I just really had a good time with it. You can get it on Amazon as a rental if you want to check it out. I'm about to start watching a mummy movie from the early 80s called Dawn of the Mummy,
Okay.
from this same inspired by the same documentary. But I'll let you know how that goes.
Oh, I think I saw that a while back. You know what I like about that documentary is that I keep seeing people on Twitter post that they're now going to watch Trick or Treat, and that makes me
They
happy.
spend a long time talking about Trick or Treat.
I gotta
They
watch
give
it.
Trick or Treat its due.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yay!
Yeah. So yeah, both the documentary, which is on Shudder, and I think that even if you are a major aficionado of 80s horror, there is always going to be movies that you have missed. And I think that with this latest installment of that documentary series, I think they're getting more into like the deep cuts. So it's allowed me to go, oh, I haven't seen that one, and I haven't seen that one. So, I'm having a good time with that. It's also still Ringo Award nomination time. So, again, please go to their website, nominate me for Best Writer, nominate Halloween Man for Best Webcomic and Best Hero. And if you're feeling extra generous, nominate Global Comics for Best Publisher. I'm going to be doing this every week for a while, but like if you enjoy, even if you're not a comic book fan and you just enjoy hearing me ramble on about horror movies, this is a solid. You could do me.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, and we totally will. Okay. Well, saw Shazam, loved it. And I'm realizing as I get older that if you could figure out how to watch movies without like engaging yourself in the discourse, you can enjoy the movies a lot more because we just thought it was a whole bunch of fun. I
do my best to do that all
right.
the time.
Today,
I
because I find Twitter to be so like toxic but also addictive, I've gone through and started, anytime something pisses me off, I just mute it, and I'm going to try and fix my Twitter feed to where it's just like, hey, here's some cool vintage paperbacks I found without the anger. And I'll let you know next week if that experiment is working out. March 20th, which is tomorrow when we're recording this, and probably the day that this episode comes out, March 20th marks the 31st anniversary of Paul Verhoeven's Basic Instinct, which I think is a killer movie. I mean, it is mysterious. It is like an inheritor of Hitchcock. It is it's got
Isn't there a
Sharon
new version
Stone.
of that coming out?
I have no idea. If there is, that's possible. I don't know. But Sharon Stone plays a writer, and I'm a sucker for any time there's a writer in the movies because you can see what their imaginary lives are like. People have been talking about it and kind of even trashing it for years because it's part of that whole movement of like sexy crime movies of the 90s. But boy, it's good, and I encourage you to go check out Basic Instinct.
I'm thinking of Fatal Attraction. Sorry.
There is a new Fatal Attraction coming out, and is it Lizzie Kaplan who plays?
Yeah.
Who plays the Glenn Close character? Yeah. So so maybe it's time for a revival of all of these the erotic thrillers of the 90s. Yeah, and as we say on this show, thriller is horror. Thriller is horror with a suit on. So this is on brand. Anyway, happy birthday, Basic Instinct. Okay, that's it for this week. Everybody be excellent to one another. Come to the Facebook page. Let us know what you think, what we didn't cover, and I hope that at least with the topics that we hit, we made you happy. Now I'm self-conscious. We'll figure out how we're gonna do it next week. Next week is gonna be a big show with the Monster Movie Happy Hour, and a movie that I'll bet that most of the audience have not heard of. So have a great week, and I will talk to you soon. Bye, guys.
Night.
Good night.
Night.